Hi, hello. My name is Laurent Matteo. I'm working with BMC Software as a lead product developer. And this session will be going beyond codeless with the BMC Helix platform. So I'm going to show you that you can create application using the BMC Helix platform without a single line of code. But sometimes you need to go a bit further. And for that, we provide to you tools to allow you to create your own custom UI elements or custom Java processes, REST API that you can use inside our next or out-of-the-box object. So first of all, the BMC Helix platform. So like I said, the BMC Helix platform allows you to create and design application very easily. So for that, you have a different object, record definitions to store data, view definition to display the data or to display UI elements, process and rule definitions that will contain your business logic, and some other objects I will not talk about right now here, but you can see in the documentation. So once your application is ready on your development environment, because you develop your application directly in a web page, you can just export it and deploy it inside another environment, for example from tailoring to QA to production. And if you need to modify your application, let's say to create a couple of new views, you can just export those objects and update your application on your next environment. So let's see a small example of an application. So I recorded very quickly a very simple version of change management. So if I launch my application, you can see that I have a change management console. So here I can create a change. Here I got a list of changes. And here when I select a change, I can see my change detail. So now my process, what I want to do is when I create a change, I want to have a notification, a visual information that my change has been created and is waiting for approval. Now what I want next is when my change approver approves or rejects my change, I want to receive a notification depending on if he approves or rejects my change. So it's a very simple business rule. So let's see how it is working now. So here I'm going to save my change. I received a notification saying that my change is waiting for approval. And if I select my change, I can see that the status of my change is new. And I have more like accepted or rejected. And I can find my description. So let's see how I created that. So first of all, I got my record. And the record is defining what fields are going to be available to me and will contain my data. So I have my description and I have my status with the different options. You can also see that this record is holding my changes. Then I got a view, and inside my view, here is my view, my change console, so this view. So I have different objects in my palette accessible to me. Some of them are BMC objects, like basic components, and some of them are actually custom components, but I will talk about that later. So here, if I want to display a list, I can just drag and drop a record grid and tell that I want to display a list of changes. If I want to display one particular change, I can use the record editor element and tell that I want to display a particular change. So here in this example, I'm displaying a change and the ID of the change is coming from the selected row for my grid. So that's the view part. Now for my business process, so I have a processes. In my process, I will have an input, my change. So here is a notification I receive that my change is waiting for approval. So here I got a palette as well, like I had with View Designer. So I can select an alert. And here I have a user task. And this user task is actually very interesting because, like I said, I want to wait before sending a notification that my change has been accepted or rejected. I want to wait for the change approver to actually accept or reject my change. So here, this user task is going to wait for my change and is going to wait until the status of the change is not new. Then it will continue and it will take this branch if the status is rejected, and it will take this branch if the status is accepted. So let's see how is it working. So here I can see the running processes, or the processes that run in the past, completed, or the ones that are running right now. And here you can see that this instance is the one that just launched. So highlighted in gray is the steps that are actually already executed. So here you can see that the notification is in gray, which means that I received the notification. The step in green is the one that is actually the one waiting. So right now, like we saw in the process, we are waiting for the change approver to accept or reject the change. So you don't have to do anything to wake up this process. When the value is going to change, automatically the process will wake up. It will have kept the change in the context, and it will continue the process. You don't have to do anything to wake him up. We are going to do that for you. So here, as a change manager, I decide to accept the change. So I click. It has been done. And now if I go back to my process and I just refresh, I can see that my process is actually now finished, completed. And to see what happened, I can just follow the steps that are highlighted in gray. So we can see now that this user task is executed, and this path has been taken because I accepted the change. So here is how you can create a very simple application without a single line of code using the BMC Helix platform. And let's see how we can relate that with custom code now. So you can do different level of custom code in the BMC Helix platform, like I told you a bit earlier. So you have the UI view components that are using some AngularJS code, 17x. So you can have UI component, and you can have button actions. Then on the backend level, using Java, OpenJDK 11, you can create a Java service that can be used in ruler processes, or you can create REST API or commands. The great thing is you can use third-party libraries, whether in JavaScript, like Google Maps, for example, or Signature, or you can use third-party libraries in Java as well. So one example is, of course, Twilio to send text messages. So to help you creating custom UI or custom backend code, BMC actually provides to you SDK with methods you can use for AngularJS and Java. So for example, if you want to call a REST API from your view component, you don't have to use $HTTP like the base object from AngularJS. We provide to you, for example, Rx resource object. So you wouldn't have, for example, to think about error trapping or to put a specific header for post or delete operation, because we are going to do that for you. Same thing for Java. If you want, for example, to get record instances from a record definition, we provide to you a record service to very easily get data from our system. So, and the good thing to know is we are actually using the same object internally when we are coding on the platform. So what is the first thing you can customize in the BMC Helix platform. So like I said, there is a view component. So view component is a graphical element that will be accessible in the palette. So here you can see that the event planner has multiple view component. And this one, for example, is a chart. And it's a custom view component. So you can just drag and drop it next to BMC out-of-the-box object. So data can be exchanged between components with input and output parameters. And you can customize both runtime and design time. So what does that mean? Well, if we take an example, let's say I want to create a view. So let's say I want to create a new view. So you saw already record grid, which is out of the box elements. And here are some custom view components I coded for event planner. So one of them, for example, is feedback star. So you can see it's available also in the palette, and I can just drag and drop it like any object from BMC. Here I got some input parameters. So for example, the number of stars. So I can decide to display 3 stars by default. Or I could choose, for example, another field or a value coming from another view component. Here I can display the number of stars to display with a slider. And I can change the color. So here is what it means to customize runtime and design time. Here we are in the design time because we are in the view designer, we are designing our view. So you can see here you got some custom code because by default you don't have a slider, you don't have a color picker, and you don't have, for example, the number of stars that change dynamically. And this is a runtime. So the code that is executed for my view component at design time and runtime is not the same. So that's what I was trying to explain, is for one view component you can have some different code running during the design time in the view designer and some other code running at runtime. So for example, here I have an output parameter. So let's say I want a rich text that will display the number of stars. So here I've got my feedback star view component, and I can see the selected star value. So if I refresh my page, I can see that I have 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, 2 stars. So which means that we have an input number 3, but this view component also exposes an output parameter. That output parameter can be consumed by another view component, and it can be done dynamically. So as soon as I change something, the other view component would detect that the value has changed. So this is what you can do with a view component. So I'm not going to talk to you through the code like on details, because I created a series of videos and sample project that you can download freely on internet, and I will talk about in the resources at the end of this talk. So if you want to see exactly how you create a custom view component or a custom object, you can just refer to the samples I provide and to the videos to learn really how to create one. So here is an example of, let's take an example of a view component. So let's say I'm going to look for the star. So for that you need to create an application using our SDK. So it will create, for example, an application event planner, which is a Maven project. And inside this Maven project, you can see there is a file structure. And in this file structure, you can see that I have Java that will contain my custom Java code. And inside script, I have my custom view components. And one of them is actually the star system. So you can see that this one is it's pretty complicated. So let's try to take an easy one, like the CAPTCHA system. So you can see that I have different type of files. I have one config file, and then I can tell, well, I got some, like I explained, I got some code that was running at design time, and the code that is running at runtime. So in my config file, I can see the characteristic, the declaration of my view component. So I have its name, I've got the list of the input parameters, and so the input parameters when is config is true, and the output parameters when is property is true. Then I got the code running at design time. So here is the JavaScript code and the HTML template that is used. So here is just an icon. It's not on this system. I will show this one later, how it's looking like. So, but anyway, on the design time, it's very simple. It's just an icon that is going to be displayed. At runtime, it will be a bit different. I will display the CAPTCHA, and I will actually invoke Google APIs to get the CAPTCHA and sending it back to the other view components. But anyway, just think that you have one configuration, and then you have code executed at design time and runtime. So this was the first object. The next object is the button action. So the button action, if you remember my little example about Change Manager, when I clicked on the Save button, I actually saved my record instance, my record definition. So for that, when you drag and drop an action button, you have a list of available actions. Some are out of the box, like save. Some are custom, like show BMC Helix alert. This one I created. So here I'm going to send a message like, hi. And it's going to be type info or success. So here you can also see that I don't see the difference between a BMC out of the box action and a custom action. It doesn't feel out of place. It's really integrated. So when I'm going to reload my view and click on the button, I got my notification. So let's see how it is working. So this one is in sample library, source, main, web app, script, and this time it's not in view component but in actions. So I still have one config file that will give my input parameters, so the message and the type. But this time the execution will be in service, so it's a bit more simple in this case for an action. So here, depending on the message and the type, I will display a Rx notification message, for example, .success message. So Rx notification is actually a very good example of the SDK I was talking about. Rather than doing so, for example, like window alert or using Bootstrap to display toast or notification message, we created internally an object to display notification. And this is a notification object we are using internally, for example, when you save a record definition or anything in a platform. That's the object we are using. So this one will take care of using the object and passing the message. So it's just one line of code. If you wanted to do the same thing, it might take maybe 100 lines of code and using Bootstrap or another library. So you don't have to do that because we provide it to you. And this way, if you decide to trigger a notification, they will exactly look like BMC notification out of the box. So they don't feel out of place as well. So for action, it's a bit more easy. It's a bit easier. You've got one configuration file and you've got one runtime file. We will see later in another example, it can be a bit more complex, but by default, it's something like, it will look something like that. Then we have the Java services, which are pretty much like a view component, but on the back end. So you can access them from the palette inside the process or rule designer. And it has input and output parameters. So let's take a very simple one. So this time it's not in web app, but it's in Java. And here is a very simple service. So how does it work? This one is very simple. It has one action, so one input parameter, username, and it will return an object. And this object will just return two properties, username and password. It will return the test.me object. So it will appear inside a process. So I can see that his name is generate password. Oh, I didn't install it here. Okay. But it will be available in the palette here. So for example, here I got other custom Java services. So let's see actually if I don't have something on my other environment. So here you can see that I generate password. Here is the service I was talking about. So in input, he has the username. And let's say in output, I can have, for example, my password and username. So my two properties. Because when we return a class from our process, from our service, we will actually automatically discover what are the properties from this class, and we will give you the option to take, for example, the username of the password, like to access the different properties. You don't have to do anything. We understand that we send you back, the service sends back a custom class, test.me, with two properties, username and password. So you will have access to those two properties later in the process designer. Then we have REST APIs. So REST API is pretty cool. So if you are used to Remedy ITSM, you know that you have access to the REST APIs, for example, to get a list of incidents using API/RC/v1, something like that, /entry. So the only problem with that is, let's say that you have a lunch application and you want to integrate it with a third-party vendor that will allow them to order lunch, for example, for a customer. If you are using the out-of-the-box REST APIs, you would have to tell them, okay, you need to contact v1/rc/api/entry/ the record definition name, and then give them the payload with all the necessary fields. So first of all, it could be like maybe not a security issue, but a security problem because you expose everything. So someone who would know the record definition could try, for example, to get the data back. The other thing is you give too much a burden to your third-party vendor, to the vendor, because he would have to figure out. He doesn't really care about the full object. The only thing he needs to send you is pretty much the lunch ID, like the menu, and the customer information. So the good thing you can do with the BMC Helix platform is you have the out-of-the-box REST API as well, but you can decide to create your own. So here, for example, you have like a Word username, and creating this REST API would focus with exactly what you need for your business. Let's say, for example, you want to order lunch. You could create a REST API like /order/lunch, and getting two parameters, for example, lunch, like the menu ID and the customer ID. So it's focused. It doesn't disclose anything like a record definition, and it's much easier to use for your end user, for your vendor. So if you want to use it, you would have something like that. So you would call /API/your bundle application, and then hello world. So that's the application name, the REST API path, and gems. And it will return the object. So let's see how it works. So here we have our REST API. So it looks pretty much exactly the same like a service. It looks pretty much like a service. And if you are familiar with Jersey and Jackson, it's nothing new. It's actually pretty standard. So you tell the path, the main path hello, then the path from your GET API, word, and the parameter. So you get your parameter and you send back an object. So this object, like we saw before, has two properties, username and password. And when it's going to be executed, it's automatically being encoded in JSON. So it can be consumed here. So here it is parsed, but it will come like that, like a JSON object. So it's much easier to be consumed by a third-party vendor. So this one is actually pretty cool. Then let's say you have pretty much like a subset of the REST API. It's a Java command. I'm not really going to talk too much about it. It's pretty much like a edge case. It's let's imagine that you want to launch a process, you want to launch one specific action, but you don't expect anything else in return. So you would use pretty much a command in this case. So think about it like a REST API, but instead of giving a path like /hello/world/gems, you would say, I want to execute a command, and you would give the command name. So for example, here the command name would be, let's see if I have an example for that. Here my command name would be simple command. So like I said, it's not really used a lot. We are using that mainly internally. Most of the time you would use, I think 99% you would use a custom REST API. And this one is a bit less user-friendly to use, to be honest. And because by default it will not return any data, you wouldn't know what exactly happened. It's more like a fire and forget somehow. Then the next object I will not talk too much about is connectors. If you want to know more about connector, I did another session about integrating BMC Helix Platform in the cloud with on-premise ITSM, and I talk more about it there. And I show some source code. So I really encourage you, if you're interested, to go and check this talk. But basically how it works is, instead of having the object inside one application and hosted inside the BMC Helix platform, so here's the cloud application, the code would reside inside another server. So here's the integration controller. The reason why it would be interesting to do that is, let's say that this block is on premise, so on your network, and the BMC Helix platform is on the cloud. And let's say you want to get some Active Directory information, some ITSM information, some Jira information from the cloud. So you would have to ask your security team to open a port between the cloud and Jira, the cloud and Active Directory, the cloud and ITSM. It could be a problem. So what we provide to you is, if you have a CentOS environment within your network, the connector, which is actually a piece of Java or Node.js code bundled inside a Docker image, will be hosted inside this integration controller within your network. So it will be much easier for your security team to allow communication from this integration controller to your ITSM, to your Jira, to your AD Prod. Only one port would be open between the integration controller and the BMC integration service on the cloud. And let's say that the cloud application wants to get, for example, a list of incidents. So we are going to create a connector. And this connector is going to have one action, get incidents. For execution, for example, inside the process, the cloud application will tell the integration service, I want to get incidents. The integration service will contact the integration controller and say, get incidents. The integration controller will trigger the connector that will connect to ITSM, get the incidents, and send everything back to the cloud application. So only one port is open between the cloud and your network. So now what I want to do is going through some application and talking about some challenges I had and why I went through custom code. So the first one is Event Planner. So Event Planner is an application I created like more than 2 years ago, used by BMC marketing team to track BMC events across the globe. So it's pretty easy. It's if you think about it, it should be a pretty easy application. Let's close everything else. So when I launch my application, there are two very important parts. The first one is, as a user, I should be able to request an event. So for example, I want to do a meetup in Santa Clara next month. So I should be able to submit one. And then as an event administrator, I should have access to a console. And this console will give me all the different events taking place, so that are new, just submitted by users, the one I accepted, the one that are in progress, rejected or archived. So here you can see already some elements that are custom. So you can see that this quick sort, quick filter bar is actually not available out of the box. This chart is not available out of the box. This reporting capability here is very simple in CSV, is not available out of the box. But if you look at it, there is something that is very important. Those elements do not look really out of place with the BMC out-of-the-box elements. The buttons are available, the grid is available, the menu is available, but it doesn't seem out of place. That's the whole idea behind customization and custom view components. The goal is everything merged together nicely. But you can see also that if we remove those custom components, like the quick filtering or the chart, the application can still work, but it will give less information and will be less user-friendly to the user. But now I have access also to a calendar. So a calendar is not available out of the box with the BMC Helix platform. Now try to imagine an event planner without a calendar functionality. That wouldn't be very nice. It's something that is very important for this application. And you can see that here when I click and I select one event, I open actually an out-of-the-box view. So, and notes is actually something that is not out of the box. So once again, something that is custom code is going to open an object that is out of the box, and a view will contain out of the box and custom objects. And once again, the goal is everything is seamless. Nothing should look out of place. So for this application, we saw that it was very important for the business to have some custom elements. So here is a console I was talking about. But even if visually it looks like I had to customize a lot of things, let's see the statistics about this application. So it has 30 record definitions to store the event, session, and speakers, 73 views, 21 processes to change, for example, the permissions, 31 rules, associations, name list, and permission system. So it can lead, for example, to very complex process. So here is a process from Event Planner. And this one is used to update the feedback. So when someone leaves a feedback for a session, here is a process that is called to update the vote amount and calculate the new rating for the session. So you can see that this process is a bit more complicated than the one we saw in the beginning in change management. But now, within all these objects, we can see that I had to code 13 UI elements and 1 custom service. I have also to create 3 custom REST API used for external reporting, but when you take those 17 custom objects, and when you compare them to the full application, it's not that much. But not that much is actually very important for this application. So that's why BMC Helix Platform is really cool, in my opinion, for that. We allow you, when something is missing but very important for you, but maybe not very important for everyone, so it wouldn't maybe make sense to integrate this functionality within the platform, but as it is important for you, we give you the tools to do so, to create those custom elements. So here is a couple of custom elements I mentioned, so the chart, the notes, the star system I showed you before, and of course the calendar. So here you can see the only custom backend service that I'm using here to verify that when someone leaves a feedback anonymously. So the lesson from this application is I had to create some custom view component mainly that were very important for my business. But also what we saw is what the important part here was not the design time, but it was the run time. It was what information were displayed. So information inside the calendar, information within a chart. So here the focus was more on the runtime from view components. But let's take another example with Event Planner v2. So it will be the next version of Event Planner. Like I said, I coded this application 2 years ago. And I have some things in my to-do list coming from my users. And one of them is to allow anonymous user and to allow people to register and reset their password. The reason behind this feature, register and reset password, is because right now I am playing the IT role, which means that when someone forgets his password, he will contact me and say, my password is not working anymore, which means 99% of the time the user forgot his password and I have to do the job to reset the password. Or, well, we just hired this guy and you need to create an account, so I need to create an account for this guy. So once again, I'm losing time and I'm playing IT. So what I want is to allow users to register themselves and reset the password. So this way I would have way less work and it would be also more secure. So let's talk about the anonymous user. So the anonymous part is not possible for you because it would mean modifying actually the BMC Helix Platform source code, which you cannot do, but I can because, well, I'm working with BMC, so I have access to the source code. So you can see here that I created two buttons, forgotten password and sign up, and sign in as event user, so guest. So when you will click on it, you will actually log in as a user, as an anonymous user. And when you click on forgotten password and sign up, you will access to a specific view where you can sign up or put your email and to receive a link to reset your password. So this you cannot do, but forget about it. I mean, let's think that you are given like a system and like a system user, like demo or test user, and you log in with this system user and you have access to exactly the same views. So let's see how it works. So here I'm connecting on my event planner. This is the login page, and as you can see, my login page has been customized. So I can, when I click on it, I will just have access to the request speaker view, which is different now because it's V2. So it's not, it's still a work in progress, but it's more user friendly. But I'm not yet done on the UX. So your user can request an event, but it didn't have to enter any username and password. I mean, this one is auto-filled by Chrome. On the same way, I can say I want to sign up. And when I sign up, I have access to another view. And when I give my user, so my first name, last name, and email, a comment, and I have a CAPTCHA. So, and here I can request to sign up. So the reason why it's very important here is because in part of my use case, I want the user to sign up on their own. So when they click on sign up, they are sent to a view, which is not like a totally custom view, like an AngularJS view. Hosted, for example, on the Tomcat, it's a view from Innovation Studio. I will show you later. The user can enter in the record editor some personal information. And here is a custom part that is very important. It's a CAPTCHA from Google, reCAPTCHA v2. Why is it important? Because the user, anyone can click on sign up, but I don't want to graduate from not having to create accounts to clean up like 5,000 accounts created by bots. I want something to check that it's not creating by bots, so I want a CAPTCHA system. So here I implemented the CAPTCHA system I showed you earlier from Google. And you can see that it doesn't look out of place. It's within the record editor itself. It's not a field coming out of the box inside the BMC Helix platform, but it's still inside within these borders or within the record editor. So it doesn't seem out of place. But for me, it's very important. And everything is done here again in the UI. So that's the first part of the process. So the user doesn't need to log in. The user needs to enter some information. The admin will decide if he accepts or rejects the query, the new user. If the user is accepted, an account is created and an email is sent to the user with a link. The user clicks on the link and sets its password. To change the password, it's pretty much the same idea. It's a subset of what was before. Is the user click on the link in the home page, enters his email, and he will receive an email with a link, and clicking on the link will allow the user to reset its password. So when you think about it, so I showed you the self-registration, so it requires a new UI component, a custom one, to display the CAPTCHA. But because of security reason, I want not only to check that the user checked the CAPTCHA or not, but I want to check that the CAPTCHA is actually correct and the user did not try to cheat, you customizing JavaScript, for example. So Google allows you to verify that the token returned by the CAPTCHA is actually correct. For example, it has not been used before, or it's actually valid. So I created a custom Java service to verify the token. Once the user is registered and the admin accepts it, I want to generate a link. So this link is also generated by a custom Java service because it will encrypt a string. So I needed a custom Java service. And by the way, I want also the admin to receive not only a notification by email, but also a text message. So I'm going to leverage Twilio. So I need to create another Java service. So when you think about it, here is what we have custom for this Event Planner v2. And just a login page, just for self-registration and resetting password. So I have Google reCAPTCHA v2 implementation that actually I'm going to use multiple times for registration, reset password, request an event, leaving feedback. So one code used multiple times. The password field, a regex component, because we don't have mask for text field. So for example, to check if the password is complex enough. And on the Java side, I need to validate the CAPTCHA token and I need to integrate Twilio as well. So I have quite some custom code. So here is the cinematic of the sign up. So the user clicks on sign up. It will enter the information. And something that is very interesting is, well, here you can see that the verification expired and the sign up button is not active anymore. It will only be active when the user actually answers the challenge from Google. So here, that means that this custom view component is going to broadcast an event saying my challenge has been completed. So this button is inside this condition, disable condition, the output parameter for the reCAPTCHA. So back to the cinematic. So the user clicks on sign up. It will enter the personal information, answers the challenge, click on sign up. The admin will receive a text message and notification. The admin will access an admin console. And for this user, will decide what kind of permission and roles to apply. So by default, it's even application access. Can request events, but it could decide to give it more power. For example, event admin. So this way, the event admin can decide without me what kind of access to give. So I don't have to tell, well, I created this user. Can you please add some permission and roles? He can do it himself. So in this case, a link is generated and sent to the user. So when the user clicks on the link, and Siri decides to talk on her own. Magic. So when the user clicks on the link, he is automatically logged in and to this page where I can set the password. So here is a custom field for the password field, and it is actually linked to a regex to check that there is one lowercase letter, uppercase, one digit, one special character. And I reuse my view component here, the CAPTCHA. And here is a process for user approval. So let's see how it works. So here the event admin decides to approve someone. So here you can see in gray, highlighted in gray, the path we went. So I'm getting the person by email, generating a token, sending a notification. Here is my custom code to generate the link. I'm logging something in my logs. I sent the user notification with the link. And I say, well, everything is successful. And here is the process that I use to change the password. So you can see that the very first activity from my process is to verify that the CAPTCHA is actually correct. Everything that comes after is not correct if the CAPTCHA is not correct. So here is my first custom Java service that is actually incredibly important. Then I'm using the user from the token, getting the person, changing the password, do some logs, sending a notification, and sending a notification to the user that the password has been modified. So for this example, you can see that what I coded custom is actually still very important for my business, actually incredibly important. And this one is more focused on the backend, so on the service. The UI is actually pretty simple, still on the runtime side, as you could see, to display the CAPTCHA. But on my business process, the very important part was to send a text message, verify that the reCAPTCHA token is correct, and generate a link. So everything was around security and everything is around the backend this time. So the last example I would like to share with you is virtual chat. So why is this example very important? And I think very interesting. So it can happen that you have to integrate, let's say, your BMC Helix Platform application within a portal of your company, for example, SharePoint. And it is possible to embed a view from BMC Helix Platform within your portal, within an iframe. But sometimes it is the other way around. Let's say that a colleague of yours created an application and the BMC Helix application will be actually the portal and you need to integrate a third-party application. So that's what happened in this example. So virtual chat, if you know about it, is a product running on Mitya right now. And it has been redeveloped by the BMC Helix core team and running on a Tomcat. And an integration has been done with Smart IT. Smart IT embeds virtual chat as an iframe and needs to communicate with it. So, for example, there is a queue in virtual chat and you can decide, okay, I want to talk to Alan. And the virtual chat is going to send you an event telling you you selected Alan. And you are going to load the Alan profile and Alan incidents. And the same way, if you decide to create a new ticket for Alan, you might want to send back the information to virtual chat. So you want to exchange information. And because it's an iframe and because it's cross-domain, the easy way to do it is using post message, JavaScript post message, which is basically shouting an event. Virtual chat is going to shout, you selected Alan, and anyone can listen and say, okay, I receive a message. The message is not specifically for me, it's just shout. And the message is, I selected Alan. So you can decide to do whatever you want with it. So Smart IT is listening to this kind of message and will say, okay, Alan has been selected, I'm going to load his profile, and I'm going to load his incidents, his tickets. So the interesting part is it's looking like that. So here nothing has been selected yet. Here we have on Smart IT. And here we have when we have a chat, for example, with Lily. So you can see that we have our chat system, and here we can have the information from Lily, our location, our tickets, or assets. So the interesting part is the part on the left is virtual chat. The shell and the part on the right is Smart IT. But if you look, the look and feel is pretty much the same. So it's very hard to tell what's coming from virtual chat and what's coming from Smart IT. And that's a complete idea when I say that something shouldn't be out of place. So this is a sign of a good integration. So the part on the right is coming from Smart IT, and you exchange information. So we had a requirement on the BMC Helix platform, and this requirement that was given to me as a proof of concept was, is it possible to integrate virtual chat inside like an application inside BMC Helix platform? So I thought it would be very interesting, because if we can manage to make it flexible enough, this integration, we could integrate virtual chat in any application. So it could be inside business workflow, or it could be even inside Event Planner. For example, in Event Planner, there is a concept of event and sessions, and you can assign speakers to sessions. Right now, speakers and event admin exchange data using notes. But for example, are you done with your presentation? Can you send and upload your V1 of your presentation? You should change this title, these kind of things. Tomorrow, if we have virtual chat enabled, well, for example, the speaker could connect using chatbot and say something like, I want to talk to an event admin. Virtual chat, it will appear inside virtual chat. And the event admin could talk to the speaker and say, okay, what do you want? Well, I want to tell you that I want to upload my V1 of my presentation. Oh, okay, cool. Can you send it to me? And the user would drag and drop the presentation inside chatbot. He will go to virtual chat, and the event admin could see immediately, for example, the PowerPoint, download it on this system, do some proofreading very quickly, and send it back. But also save it automatically, for example, in the session, because there would be a message coming from virtual chat to Event Planner saying an attachment has been uploaded by the user. So you could decide not to do anything, or you could decide to automatically take this attachment and insert it inside the session automatically. So you have a trace, you have an history, subversioning. So once the event admin did some proofreading, he could send as well the attachment back, the PowerPoint back, and say, okay, here are some things you should change some titles, so back and forth. So it would be very interesting to have something that's not really hard-coded like Smart IT did. There is nothing wrong with that, because it's an application, there is nothing wrong. But imagine that if you have an option to make it flexible enough so you can insert virtual chat anywhere, and here you would have some out-of-the-box objects. So for me, that was my goal. So I did a very quick gap analysis. So when you think about it, virtual chat communicates with its environment using JavaScript post message, like I said. And it's not something the BMC Helix platform does. It does not listen to that. If you remember, when I was changing my stars, automatically my RTF text would detect it and change and say, okay, here is 4. So the way it's working is you subscribe to an output parameter. You say, I want to subscribe to the star output parameter value. So you don't have actually to do that in the UI. You just say, oh, I want value, output parameter value. But us, we understand that you want to be notified as soon as the value change. So in this case, we are going to subscribe. And each time the star value changes, it will update the value and it will send an event saying the value has changed. If you are interested, get the new value. But it's not we are not using post message. So basically it's like two people talking in French and another one talking in German. So we don't understand each other. The other thing is events are sent by virtual chat in JSON format, which can be a pretty complex, like 4 level, like a tree at 4 level, 3 or 4 layers. And it expects as well events in JSON format. So it's not really user-friendly if you expect an end user to create a JSON object, a JSON string. So that was the two biggest issues I had with this integration. So the solution I found was at runtime, I created a UI component, a UI component that will act as a wrapper. So it will take care of displaying the iframe with virtual chat, but it will also intercept all the events coming from virtual chat and re-emit them in the way BMC Helix Platform understands it, so as an output parameter. So this way the other view components, instead of listening to virtual chat, they would listen to my UI component output parameter. The same way, if I want to send an event, for example, to virtual chat, for example, send a message, I have an input parameter. This view component would have one input parameter event. That would be very simple. And the other view components would set this input parameter. And the view component would react and translate it inside a JSON object and send it to virtual chat using post message. So we would have something like that. So of course here it's a proof of concept, it's not designed to be pretty. But you can see the same idea. On the left I have my virtual chat, and on the right I've got a record editor with some out-of-the-box fields. So I have some text fields, I have panels, I have a message, pre-filled message, and when I click on it, it's going to send a message. So something like that. Give me a second. Okay, so sorry about that. This is a test server, so I need to log in. Usually you don't have to log in, but this is a test server. So you can see here that I have already received one event, which is that the login has been completed. And here I'm expecting a chat session ID, and for now I don't have anything. So when I log in with the correct user, you can see something happening here. So you can see that here I receive an event section context change because I automatically selected Peter. I have the chat session ID, and I have some chat session context. So I'm talking to Pipan with this email address. So that means that I intercepted multiple events coming from virtual chat. The first one was login completed, and this one was the context was changed to another user. So here you can see the event sent by virtual chat, so a JSON like I was talking about. And here if I want to send a message, I can enter some text, click on a button, and as you can see, the message was sent to virtual chat. So on the UI, it's actually very simple. So the right part is my application and the left part is virtual chat. But now, so like I said, the UI is very simple. It's displaying an iframe, intercepting events to translate it inside events that BMC Helix Platform can understand, receive event, and translate them inside the post message. So the runtime is actually very simple this time. But now I have another challenge, the one I was talking about. And the challenge is the way data is provided. So here you can see that for this event, I receive a JSON object. And this JSON object can be actually quite difficult, quite complex. So here I just want in this text to display, I want to talk to this user and this email address. So if I have to take a JSON and extract from a JSON user, like event, chat data, user, and user email, it's not really user friendly. I would not do a good job with, not this time the end user, but with the business analyst that is going to use my component. So how can I do that? If you look at the chat session context, so this field containing the username and the email, you can see that actually I have user and I have user email. Because what I did is for the virtual chat object, you can see here that I have received events. So I have some information, so the session ID, the event name, and inside the event I have all the events available. And one of them is session context change. And inside chat context change, you can see that this time, instead of getting a JSON object, I actually get all the properties. So it's very easy for me to say, well, I want the user, so I just want user. Well, I want the title, well, I just need the title. I want the Q type, I get the Q type. I don't have to worry about, oh, the data is coming to me as a JSON, and I want only some information. Here, it can be used like any other object, for example, a record editor, that is BMC out of the box. So the interesting part here is, like I said in the very beginning, it is possible not only for your view component to customize the runtime, but also to customize the design time. And here, as you can see, I decided that for my custom view component, I want to customize this, the data dictionary. So I will give an example in my sample library how to do that. It's a bit an advanced use case, but it's definitely very useful and it's definitely not out of place. And it's definitely very, very useful. So that's the first part. I provided an easy way to access the information. And by the way, this field is only displayed when I have a session ID set. And this session ID is actually taken from virtual chat view component session ID. So it's very easy to play around with that. And here, for example, I could say, well, I could decide to tell that I'm not going to display this button if I don't have a chat session ID active. So here I didn't do it, but nothing is stopping you to do that. But now, the other thing I was talking about is your view component should be flexible enough. So here it's very flexible for a business analyst that decide to use out-of-the-box objects. But let's say that someone from an application would want to use my view component for chatbot, but want to create some custom UI. So they don't really care about having access to all and every event properties. They just want the full event because they are going to, from this JSON, they are going to get the object and just access directly in their code this object. So I thought about that. So in this case, because I'm sending you, I did the effort to give you every properties of your event, I just can send you the full JSON as well. That's why here you got the JSON. So if you have some custom code here on the right and you're not interested in getting all properties for one specific event but just the JSON of the event, you can get it as well. So it doesn't take a lot of effort to do that in your view component. It's like one line of code, but you need to think about it. So this way your component is flexible enough to be used by not only out-of-the-box object, but also custom code. So the design of your view component is very important. So that was one use case that was very important. It's to help the business analyst to have access to the properties. Now another one is very important, and it is to send an event. So like we saw earlier during the demo, I can send a message. But when I send a message, I need to send a JSON object. But I don't want the business analyst to create this JSON object. I want to help him for that. So what I want to do is, if you look at the send message, I created a new action for that. I created a virtual chat send event button action. And I just need to select my component. And then to select the event I want to send, so send message. And it will tell me the properties that are necessary. So one of them is actually the event type. So I'm not going to ask you to give me the event type because I know it. I know it's app sending message to chat, so I'm going to fill it by myself. I just need then the chat session ID and the message to send. So the chat session ID, I can get it from virtual chat. And the message is just hi, for example, or like a field. It doesn't really matter. But now I only ask the business analyst exactly and only what you wanted. The component you wanted to send a message to. What was the event? And depending on the event, I have different input I need to provide. So the user doesn't have to think about creating a JSON object. I'm going to do it for him. This way, it will make his life easier. So now that we worked on creating custom objects and integrating them inside our views or processes, sometimes BMC Helix Platform is not the entry point for users. So most of the time it could be, for example, a digital workplace. One cool feature from digital workplace is actually the ability to load a BMC Helix Platform view inside digital workplace. So here you can see that I created an entry in menu, PWF, and inside digital workplace, and it's displaying a view, a case view from business workflow hosted on digital workplace. So I'm not going to give you really an example how to do that because I did it inside the other talk I was talking about, so integrating on-premise with the cloud. So I give a full example here so you can go and look for it. But you should know that it's possible, and it's even possible to do it if you have two different single sign-on solutions. For example, digital workplace being on-premise, and well, the Helix platform being on the cloud. It doesn't matter, we have the pre-authentication functionality that we'll talk about a bit later. That allows you to only log in once. So you log into digital workplace, and when you display the view that is coming from Helix platform on the cloud, you don't have to log in again. We know where you are the first time. We are not going to ask you for your credentials another time. So you should know also that we can embed a view inside a third-party application, for example, a PHP website, using an iframe, so it's documented how to do it. And here is a pre-authentication system I was talking about. So I'm going to go through this use case. So let's say you have an on-premise digital workplace and you want to display a view that is hosted on BMC Helix Cloud. So if you don't do anything special, you will have to log in twice, once for digital workplace, the other time when you are going to try to load the view from business workflow, because both single sign-on systems are not sharing their token or the session information. So the goal with pre-authentication is some kind of secret handshake to tell, well, you don't have to challenge the user another time because I already challenged him. So how is it working? You generate a certificate. It will generate a private key and a public key. The private key is going to be stored on digital workplace and the public key on the cloud Remedy SSO server. So this part of the configuration is done by BMC support, by the way. You cannot do it, but anyway, it's supported. Then on digital workplace, you will give the cloud SSO server domain. You will create the title. You will give the business workflow view. And at runtime, digital workplace is going to generate a JOT token signed by the private key. Once done, it will generate a link in an iframe, so with a Cloud Remedy SO server, the JOT token, and a cross launch with the business workflow view. So it will go to the BMC Helix platform. The Remedy SO server will check that the JOT token is correct against the public key, check that the user is actually correct as well, and if everything is fine, it will serve the view without having to log in another time, an additional time. So the very interesting part is it's an application to cloud, which means that here instead of digital workplace, you have, for example, a PHP website. You can do exactly the same thing. Your PHP website would handle the private key, generate the JOT token, and exchange information with the Cloud Remedy SO server. So you could do exactly the same thing. So as a conclusion, you can create custom elements on the UI, but also on the backend. So on the UI, it could be view components or button actions. And on the backend, it could be Java services or custom REST APIs. You can also use third-party libraries. So you can use, you saw that I used Google APIs for reCAPTCHA. I also use Twilio SDK to send REST API. So that's pretty nice. And you also saw that everything is integrated inside the different designer exactly next to BMC object. And nothing does seem out of place. So when I give an example about custom code and when it should be used, I'm often talking about the Millennium Falcon. Let's say that you want to build a Millennium Falcon using basic Lego bricks, so rectangles, for example. It's totally possible to do it. The only problem is when you try to design the rear part of Millennium Falcon, which is round, it might look pretty ugly because everything will have nothing will be round. It will have angles, right? Now imagine that you have the capability to create a mold, and this mold will be like a round piece. So you will spend some time once to create this mold. And once the mold is created, you can actually use it to create any piece you want, round piece you want, any number of times. You can use it wherever you want. So you can actually finish your Millennium Falcon and make it way better. So for me, custom code is pretty much like that. So on the best practice part, I would say, do not skip the requirement and gap analysis phases. It's very important. If there is an existing functionality in the platform, use it. Even if it means that you have to change maybe a bit your process or your application. Try to design your custom object to be as open and flexible as possible so it can be reused. So the best example, I think, is the reCAPTCHA object. But also, not only the reCAPTCHA object, but also the virtual chat, where I'm not only giving each event properties, but also the full event as JSON. So this way it's flexible and it can be used in any number of situations. The other good best practice is if you think that this element is going to be used in other applications, so for example, typically the CAPTCHA, it can be used in Event Planner, it could be used in Task Manager, it could be used in Business Workflow, then it doesn't make sense to bundle it inside Event Planner, right? Because it would require Event Planner to be installed to use this component. So in this case, what you can do is you can create a library and put this view component inside this library. So a library is pretty much like an application. It's just that it cannot be displayed. It doesn't have a shell. It doesn't have a menu. This way, for example, you could create a utils library with all those objects. And if you want to use them, you just have to deploy this utils library next to your event planner or business workflow or other application. Then if you think that one feature is missing, I encourage you to go to the BMC communities and create an ID. You would be surprised, quite some features from the platform are coming from user request. So we are definitely listening to people. So the last part in the best practices is what should you use? So like I said, we are giving you SDK methods in JavaScript and Java. So for example, Rx resource, Rx notification message to display a message. So try to see if something you want to do does not already exist in our SDK. So for example, instead of doing a message with with alert, we have Rx notification message that is much better. So you might want to actually use that. The other reason is because if you are using our object, it won't look out of space. If you are using alert, you will have a JavaScript alert message that will look very different from all the other notification message. So look at the SDK methods and try to use them. So if you want to see some example, there is Launch tutorial, and my sample library contains some examples of the SDK methods. Moreover, the BMC Helix platform actually bundles some libraries like D3, NVD3, and Lodash. So D3 and NVD3 are used, for example, to generate graphics or charts. So the chart I did for Event Planner is actually using NVD3. So you don't have to use like a third-party library if you want to do charts, because there is already NVD3. So look at the libraries we propose, and you can just leverage them rather than trying to use another library. Then I guess another big thing for me is don't think only about runtime. Runtime is most of the time very important and the most important part for the end user. But think also to the people that are going to use your components, so the business analyst. Because if you are, for example, a vendor creating an utility library, the end user is certainly very important, but the user of your Vue components are also very important. So once again, if you look at the components I created for virtual chat, I might have spent hours trying to see what would be user-friendly. But at the end of the day, for a business analyst, it's very important to very easily access data and send data, rather than for me going the easy path and forcing them to consume and send JSON objects. So the time you're going to spend designing your Vue component, you're going to make your end user and your business analyst happy. So here are the resources for this talk. So you have a link to a Launch tutorial. You can request a development environment. And here's also a link to my GitHub repo and YouTube channel where I explain the examples. So you can scan the code, or you can use a bit.ly link that will go to Dropbox, and you will have a list of all the resources from this page. Thank you.